counselors and Wendy and Tricia and Dustin and Dave Westland. Are we all here?
Yes.
We are.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
We're not seeing your video, though,
Ah,
President Mellon.
all right. There you go. Okay, here I am.
Yep. Great.
Okay.
There she is.
There I am. All right.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so it is 7:01, and I will call to order the Town Council regular meeting for May 4th, 2020. Wendy, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councilor Gardner,
Present.
Councilor Kulturitis,
Present.
Councilor Kulturitis is president. Councilor Schoen,
Present.
Councilor Tulowitzki,
Present.
and Councilor Leanne Mellon.
Present.
Everyone for
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll ask everyone to please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
Flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States
of America
of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which
Stand.
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
and
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and
and
justice
for all.
all.
in trouble doing.
All right. That, I know that is rather difficult because it kind of an echo there, but still good. So that takes us to the 45th Street construction update. Do we have Lee?
Yes, this is Lee Randall with DLZ. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Lee.
Hi, good, great. Okay, as far as our update goes, on Camellia Drive, we are expecting restoration to resume possibly the middle of this month in conjunction with some additional work for the town on Camellia Drive there between Columbia and Southwood.
Okay.
As far as 45th Street East, on the new construction there at the underpass, retaining wall 3 construction continues. There have been panel deliveries and they have been backfilling those T-wall panels. The underpass itself has been excavated beneath that bottom slab. Under drain installation and underground drainage is complete. About a week and a half ago, backfill of that bottom slab began. There's 2 feet of compacted aggregates beneath that bottom slab. There were some compaction and some dewatering issues at that time and last week with that rainfall. So as a result of that, there was little progress made last week in that. Also, the designer engineer of record has been contacted for a geotechnical recommendation moving forward. In addition, NDOT is talking with their geotechnical department to also provide a second opinion, which typically with LPA contracts, they don't necessarily do, but with the time-sensitive nature of this structure, they are hopefully going to review that tomorrow morning.
Okay.
The underpass, once that backfill is completed, then the contractor will begin forming and installing reinforcement for that bottom slab. Following next week, retaining wall 1, which would be the southwest corner of the underpass, construction is expected to resume there as far as grading, leveling pads, and potentially installation of some of those panels and backfill. Regarding acceleration for 45th Street, we are in essentially the 4th week of acceleration. We are about, I would say, 3 days gain with acceleration thus far. We've had 4 weeks, only 2 weekends with weather regarding that, and probably estimating about 3,500 a week. To date, we've only had the prime contractor and 1 subcontractor working at that location. So once the bottom slab construction begins above ground, that those subcontractor numbers will increase. and that will assist with the acceleration as well. Calumet Avenue, construction of the northbound lanes began April 21st. There is one lane each direction on Calumet. There's a southbound, a northbound, and a northbound left turn lane. On 45th West, we have 2 lanes westbound open for the right turning traffic southbound onto 45th, and 1 eastbound lane approaching Calumet. So temporary barrier wall has been installed, crash attenuators, asphalt has been removed in those northbound lanes. The contractor continues removing concrete curbing, sidewalk, curb ramps, things of that nature, as well as grading along those northbound lines. There's the northbound right lane, which is actually being widened, so that will be new construction in that lane itself. Existing northbound light poles have been removed between Superior and the railroad. CN has extended the crossing arms and also added a supplemental signal for northbound traffic, because northbound traffic is essentially in the center lane now, the median. Underground drainage structures have begun and continue. That's expected for the next 2 weeks. And moving forward in the future here, our traffic switch to start construction of the northbound lanes and completing, construction of the southbound lanes and completing the northbound lanes is expected around July 4th. So if you have any questions at this time, I'll be happy to take those.
Counselors, do you have any questions?
Hi, Lee. This is Steve.
Yes.
I think I heard you answer the question I've been asking each time in there of the reduction of the 49 days. I think you said there are three days taken off as part of the acceleration. Is that?
Yes, in review of the schedules, that's what I've come up with, is about 3 days gained thus far.
Okay, and is that on track versus what we had anticipated?
As far as maintaining or restoring that original schedule at this time, yes.
Okay, great. And no further complications due to the shutdown?
No, not due to the virus. Correct.
Okay, thank you for the update and the good work.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just the confirmation that Lee will be present during the remaining part of the meeting when we start talking about the additional 45th Street project.
You sure
Yeah.
better.
Yes, the change
Okay.
order.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Lee.
Certainly.
All right, thank you, Lee. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That brings us to the public comment. So Dustin, have you received any questions or comments from the public that you would like to share at this time?
I received one communication from Mike Dumovic of 1833 Tulip Lane. His question was, Dustin, why wasn't this issue with the soils? Why wasn't the issue with the bad soils determined when the core samples were taken? Or was it, and it wasn't determined to be that bad at the time? I would let Lee talk about this in a little bit more detail when we take up change order number 6 as a council. I think that will be probably the time to get into the weeds on that, but it's a good question. So Mr. Randall, please be prepared to address it directly if you would.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I agree. We'll talk about it then. So that was the only one?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That moves us to the consent agenda.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Wendy, will you please call for the vote?
Certainly, I show that Councilman Schoon made the motion and it was seconded by Councilman Kulturitis. Councilor Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Kulturitis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Schoon?
Yes.
Thank you. And Councilor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki, yes. And President Mallon?
Yes,
Very good. Passes 5-0.
thank you. We have no old business tonight, so we'll move to new business. Item A is the 45th Street change order, number 6 undercut backfill. So this brings us back to Lee, I don't know if you want to speak first, Dustin, or either way is fine. This will take us to Mr. Duma's question as well.
I just super high level, and then we can get into the details with Mr. Randall. Soil samples were taken during the design phase of this project, and the project was engineered with those results in mind. When contractors went out into the field for both the shoe fly, last year they found poor quality soils that required an undercut, which is a engineering term of taking out dirt away from the site and adding a stable base. And then in this year, as the contractor began excavating in earnest the grade separation of the newly constructed 45th, they found very challenging soils. So some of you may have gone out there on your own or with me and saw those extremely large trucks hauling away dirt and being up to their axles or above midway from their wheels. And it wasn't particularly muddy. So those were poor quality soils, and that required a 30-inch undercut. So I think I had a question from a council member earlier. Why didn't we see the shoe fly at the time? I think it was easier for NDOT and the construction engineer to combine like change orders with like change orders, and they probably anticipated finding other poor soils throughout the site as the project commenced. So they, Lee, please correct me if I'm wrong, but wanted to wait until you had a sense for the total magnitude of the undercut change orders. So what you have for you is not insignificant, but taken as a percentage of the total construction costs, it's I would say we're still in what I would consider a solid place for a project this size and the amount of change orders we've seen. It seems like a lot, but it could be so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Lee, do you want to add any color?
Sure, I can add some meat to the bones here if you like. So as Dustin had mentioned, yes, we encountered some unsuitable soils. In determining unsuitable soils in the field, that's done by proof rolling. So taking a loaded triaxle truck and running that along that soil grade. So if that truck then, ruts that soil, which it did, unfortunately, fairly significantly due to the type of soil and the moisture content within that soil, then that posed an issue, obviously, for constructing the roadway moving forward. So if we don't remove that material now, obviously that would then stay underneath the roadway and cause maintenance issues for the town moving forward. That would eventually just, with traffic on that roadway, would bring more moisture up to the surface, cause issues with your riding surface, and essentially just kind of falling apart and being just a continuous maintenance issue for you. So with that, we also did some testing of the soils to obtain, densities in place, things of that nature. And those pretty well aligned with the proof rolling in these locations. So we had locations encountered on the shoe fly, also here on 45th Street, and projecting potentially on Calumet Avenue, where that northbound right lane is being widened between Superior and CN. So essentially that right lane in that section is going to be outside of where the curb is currently. So that will be under, soil conditions. So with that, obviously, the unsuitable soils have been removed. They've been replaced with an open graded aggregate, about a 2-inch to a 1.5-inch top size material, an Indiana 2 or an Indiana 5. So that helps stabilize that section there with that unsuitable soil underneath. Just by removing 24 to 30 inches doesn't mean we removed all of it, but we removed enough of it to at least stabilize that moving forward to support the projected traffic loading. So the shoe fly itself, there were 24 inches of materials that were removed and replaced with the coarse aggregate. On 45th Street, we have both existing and new construction. So existing being the existing road bed itself. In those locations, there was 24 inches removed and replaced with the coarse aggregate. For the new construction, which is essentially your new alignment of 45th at the underpass, by geotechnical recommendation, there was 30-inch of that soil removed. In that cut, then we placed a geotextile filter fabric for both filtration and separation, because along that run and attached to the underpass itself is drainage structures and smaller pipes that are called under drains, and that is all connected to the lift station. So we want to make sure that we keep all the sedimentation out of that section so that it doesn't cause a problem with the lift station moving forward, and you have the longevity necessary for that. And then also there was GeoGrid added to above the geotextile fabric just for added stabilization, and then the 30 inches of coarse aggregate. Item quantities and the overall cost for this change order are projected at 15,800 tons of the coarse open graded aggregates. There are estimated 4,800 square yards of GeoGrid, which will be a new item as well. 3,400 cubic yards of common excavation is being added to the existing contract quantity for this purpose. Unclassified excavation, which is essentially excavation outside the existing roadway, that quantity is being decreased overall. There was a plenty of quantity based in the engineering calculations for the contract, so at least there was a surplus there. And aggregate for under drain, which was intended for the under drain to be trenched in, now it's incorporated in conjunction with that undercut. So those aggregates were not necessary. So there's a deduction of 200 cubic yards for that existing item. So total estimated change order cost is $684,451.50. And that includes, of course, our projection for Calumet. Hopefully that northbound lane doesn't require what's anticipated, but as Dustin mentioned earlier, we didn't want to provide a change order to you last year and then have to create yet another change order as well. So if you have any questions with that, I'll be happy to take those as well.
Counselors, do you have any questions for Mr. Roundel?
This is Steve. I would just refer back to the questions submitted by Mr. Dumovic, or Dumovic, sorry for the pronunciation, in terms of why this, how we didn't discover this during the original soil samples that were taken.
Well, I certainly can attest to that, being involved with just the construction aspects of it. What was included in the geotechnical report included parameters for organics and liquid limits, or plus, kind of like almost like rolling it out in a rat tail like a Play-Doh, which those limits we've encountered were almost half of those parameters set forth in that report. But again, being involved in the construction aspect, I can attest to what transpired prior.
Lee, let me ask, maybe it's the same question, just asked a different way. And if it is, I apologize. I'm not trying to, not trying to get you in a corner or anything, but is it the type of soil that's out there, or was it the depth of the soil that was the issue?
No, it's mostly the type of soil and the moisture content. Obviously, it's a clay type material. So the wetter that material is, the more what they refer to as plastic. I don't want to say soup-like, but certainly, pliable like a putty.
Okay.
So it's not stiff in any way at that point once there's excess of moisture.
Thank you.
Sure.
And my other question was regarding the the funding of the project, and maybe Dustin, you have something to say about this. Like, I understand the town didn't foot the entire bill for the 21 million, but it was coming from a number of sources. This change order, is it also distributed across a number of sources, or is this left to the town? And is there any way, do we have any, if it is all for the town, is there any movement or any way to distribute the change order amount at all?
All change orders are the responsibility of the town, which is why I take no joy in bringing these before the council for your approval and consideration. On the other hand, the funding mechanism that we find ourselves in is extremely advantageous compared to what we thought it would be initially. So when this was working through the NDOT process to be let, we had a letting price that was way up here. And the price it came in on was way down here. So even when you add these change orders, we're still not even approaching what we anticipated the town's portion would be. So that's the answer to your question. The town is responsible for all change orders. And your second part of the question, I believe, was can we, or is there an opportunity to distribute the magnitude of the change orders to our other funding partners? And there is not.
Okay, thank you. And darn.
Yeah.
If there are no other questions, I would make a motion that we accept the change order as presented for the additional undercut and basing of the material for the roadways.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Before calling for the vote, is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, Wendy, will you please call for the vote?
Certainly. I show Councilman Gardner made the motion and it was seconded by Councilor Tulowitzki. Councilor Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilor Kulturitis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Schoon, how do you vote? Councilor Schoon?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
Thank you. And President Mellon?
Yes.
Yes. I show 5 affirmative and none against.
All right, thank you. That brings us then to item B, the Robinson Engineering Supplemental Agreement number 4.
Yes. So when all the way back in 2019, you saw supplemental agreement number 3 that allowed Robinson and more significantly Lochner, their subcontractor for the structure design, to continue to work on an hourly basis, verifying shop drawings and working with the contractor on the constructability of some elements of this project. So what we've seen is them go through the limits of the previously accepted hourly supplemental agreement. The previous amount was $100,000 on a $20 million project. We're bringing for your consideration today an additional supplemental agreement not to exceed $60,000. I had that number have a little bit higher just in case. I don't want to do this again, but to give a sense of scope, this is a hugely complex project with a staggering amount of detail. And it's mission critical to the path towards constructability to have the design team on board and on call in the case of a detailed technical question. For example, right now, and Lee and Brad, I'll let you talk a little bit more about the details of this, but the rebar placement for the concrete structure that will actually be the bridge deck that will hold the trains, sometimes 2 at a time, over this roadway is just phenomenally intricate. And this is the kind of thing where you don't want to be flying blind. You want the design team with you. If this was a county bridge where it's just a deck over the Hart Ditch, we probably wouldn't be looking for supplemental agreement number 4. We probably wouldn't look for supplemental agreement number 1, quite frankly. But this is a very, very large project with, I would say, 0 room for error. And I think this is incredibly important. Lee, do you want to talk about the scale of the complexity of this, or in your experience where you've had to have the design engineer, because you've been the design engineer yourself in different projects, the way this works with the LPA and the construction engineer?
Yeah, I've been on the construction side of that, Dustin, and typically, structures, like you mentioned, are not of this magnitude itself. With this structure itself, we're talking 2 million pounds of reinforcing steel and about 3,200 cubic yards of concrete. So that alone equates to about 6,000 tons, over which, that's just a dead load of the structure itself. That doesn't include the track itself, the ballast, and of course the live load being the trains, as you mentioned, either 1 or 2 potentially at any given time. I don't know if was there something else perhaps you want me to add to that?
No, I think that was a good explanation.
Okay.
So, I mean, why are you seeing supplemental agreement number 3? It's because the contractor has had to work with the design engineer on a number of elements as we constructed this project. The shoe fly was, I think, a little bit more complex than the contractor anticipated. And now that we're nearing the end of the bridge portion, so if you were to ask me, are there any other things that could be, from a constructability or design standpoint, problematic? As a layperson, I would probably say no, because the shoe fly, the walls, and the bridge structure are the real head scratchers on this one. Lee, is that a accurate layperson's read?
Yes, that's accurate. So yeah, we still have full construction of that underpass to go. So their involvement will still be vital.
Hey, Dustin, this is
Yep.
Brad. The one thing I would add is, a perfect example of this is the geotechnical change order that we just looked at. I mean, that's soils that we specifically went back to the engineer of record and asked for, their opinion, their recommendation in terms of how to deal with some of that. Because it's not just a matter of, mud in a hole, but there's a structural aspect to it that, as construction engineers in the field, we can propose ideas, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, we don't have the design background for this particular project to be able to say that is structurally, what the project needs. So, I mean, that's an example right now of what's happening. And you're exactly right. The more you come out of the ground, typically the less issues you run into, but we're not completely out of the ground, and there's always obstacles here and there.
And that's a really good example, Brad. Thank you very much.
I would make a motion that we accept the supplemental agreement number 4 with Robinson Engineering, not to exceed a cost of $60,000.
Second, Tulowitzki.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We've had a lot of discussion, but is there any more before I call for the vote?
I see some names listed here from the firms. Are those the original design engineers from 2009? King, Hilson, Herring, Shelton, Casse.
I can speak to King, Hilson, and Herring. Hilson came on the project probably in November of 2018. He was not on the Robinson design team, but he's done a phenomenal job getting this project to the point where it was ready to let. So credit where credit's due. Chris King is still at Robinson. Dan Herring is still the engineer of record for the structure. I do know that, yes.
Okay. And this 60,000 that's the cap. If we don't need to call them, we may not spend any of that. But this
Correct.
authorizes us to get their input with no delay through the rest of the project, unless it would go over this. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Wendy, can you please call the vote?
The record will show that Counselor Gardner made the motion. It was seconded by Counselor Tulowitzki. Counselor Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Counselor Gardner was yes. Counselor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Schoen?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
And President Mellon?
Yes.
That's 5 to the affirmative. The supplement number 4 is accepted.
Thank you. That takes us to the to item C, AES proposal for pavement coring services for our Beverly Place Improvement Project.
Sure. This is an item that I asked to be put on here. You know from previous updates to council that I had SEH take a look at Beverly Place in an ongoing initiative to continue to invest in the northwest section of town. We're looking at a number of streets. This is probably one of the worst streets, Beverly Place. So the idea behind this project of re-engineering what a reconstructed Beverly Place would look like will put us in a strong position for when a community crossings grant opens up. This can go to the front of the list because the constructability of those projects is looked at and with a certainty of cost. So in the course of doing that due diligence, we talked a little bit about boring soil samples. This is a pavement coring service that SEH did not have the capability to do in-house, so they went to their subcontractor, their preferred AES. If SEH were to do this work with AES, they would pass that cost on to us for about 10 to 15%. Management fee, I thought, why don't we just contract directly with AES and save that 10 to 15% for this piece of work. So that's what you have before you is a proposal for coring services for Beverly Place.
Dustin, and that's the lump sum of the $1,500. That's how we're moving on.
That's
Is that
it.
the most? Okay.
Yep.
I'd make a motion. Go ahead, and Dr.
No,
Ann,
go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Go
I
ahead.
would make a motion that we accept the advanced engineering service proposal for a fee of not to exceed $1,500 for the pavement course services for the Beverly Place Improvement Project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or discussion?
Yes. There are just a few houses, 3 or 4, I think, where the front of the house and the only access to those houses and driveways is Beverly. Is the street going to be, are they going to be able to get in and out of their driveways during this time period?
Yes.
That's all I needed to know.
My question for this is for just to get the design services put together for this project. What is the time frame for this project? And the project itself, did you mention that the project itself is going to be applied for community, the community crossing grant?
Yeah, so it's my hope that we can include this in our next grant application. The next call for applications, I believe, is in July. And then we wait for our award towards the end of the fiscal year. And it would probably look at constructability at the beginning of the next construction season next year.
When does bid specifications, if the street would go, would the bid documents be put together by SEH? Has that already been, or is this part of their process?
This is part of that due diligence.
Okay, thank you.
And we wouldn't put together bid specifications until we knew we had an awarded grant.
Okay, thank you.
I just really quick before we go, Lee and Brad, you guys are more than welcome to stay, but I don't think we have any more 45th business. So stick around if you'd like, but know that I won't judge you if you leave.
Very good. Thanks, Dustin.
Copy that, thanks.
There they go.
Dustin, do you have an idea how much the project will cost when, a rough idea?
I could take a stab at a guess, but I'd be wrong, Ken. We're looking at a complete.
Okay.
This is not a mill and overlay situation. This is going to be a complete reconstruction. The curbs have failed on Beverly. It's a rough street. It deserves
Yeah.
reconstruction. Not knowing the cost of commodities, what they're going to be in a year, I couldn't tell you. Oil last time I looked was negative $37 a barrel. Maybe pavement will be super cheap. I couldn't.
They'll pay us.
Yeah. Kidding.
Dustin, my question, is this just the stretch between Homan and State Line, or does it go all the way over to Manor?
Yes.
The section we're talking about is just from home and state line.
Yeah, I mean, my only comment here is that this is a unique part of town with a big median. And so I'm supportive of making some investments over there and hopeful that the community crossing will happen. Do we have any indication or any gut feel of whether the crossing grants will be impacted this year because of the financial woes across the country?
Well, the next call for applications is in July. So you're gonna see, when I see, the magnitude of the total amount to be awarded. That's usually, there's a big press release and we're accepting applications. We have this many hundreds of millions of dollars to go. And I don't know how NDOT comes up with that number. I think it's a budgeted number based on certain assumptions, mostly centered around the fuel tax and how that fuel tax comes into the state and then is in a portion to various local governments and other jurisdictions like counties and things like that. So if you were to look at the amount people are driving, it's less. The last I heard from NDOT, they were seeing a decrease in traffic on their interstates by about 50%. That data is old. It might be higher now. I also know that just as a consumer, when I fill up my gas tank, it's significantly less. And that means there's significantly less fuel tax revenue going to the state that can then trickle down to local jurisdictions. So if you were to ask my sense of it, I would say the magnitude of the grant program is going to be diminished, probably significantly. That's just a gut feeling based on how I know those funds are apportioned. And knowing the information that I know, I could be wrong. They could use a portion of the $2 billion state surplus to bulwark that program. I don't know. I'm not at that table to have that conversation. But I would be shocked if there was not a community crossing grant program.
Okay.
So I'm going to move forward with the assumption that there will be, and I want us to continue to be competitive because we've got a pretty good record with this.
Yeah. Yeah, and to that end, this is a great way to get ready with a pretty simple, maybe relatively small project, given it's just those couple of blocks.
Yeah.
So thank you. That's helpful.
All right. So Wendy, can you please call the vote?
Certainly. It appears that Councilor Gardner made the motion to accept, and it was seconded by Dr. Kulturitis. And then Councilor Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Schoon?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
And President Mellon?
Yes.
So we vote 5-0 to accept.
Thank you. That takes us to item D, the alley grading proposal.
There we are. So I had this, you can see by the date, I had this on a draft agenda a while ago, and I held it off a little bit out of concern long-term for its placement with other priorities in town for public improvement projects. What changed my sense of urgency on this was the rain that we experienced last week. It was not, a 100-year storm. It was just a good soak. We got about close to 3 inches. What we saw in many backyards, my own included, is a lot of standing water. And this project proposal will eliminate that problem for a lot of residents. So I think that just after what I would not consider, again, a super significant rain, caused significant challenges for residents. Perhaps the problem's getting worse, which means the urgency around that problem becomes more acute on my judgment. So I'd like you to at least consider it. So the project scope for this is the engineering of the proper grading of these alleys. These alleys are in the northeast section of town. I have a project map here for you on a following page, but there we go. So all these yards that will be affected have some degree an amount of moisture in them, and it's our intention that this project will, if not eliminate, then certainly mitigate a significant portion of that. And we all know, living in town, that water is a constant challenge, and if there's anything that we can do to alleviate that, I think that's a good opportunity. So that's the sales pitch.
Yeah, I would just say this is in Ward 4, so I've received a couple of emails just recently, some of them including photographs of large amounts of standing water in the alley. In fact, in the alleys that are yellow on that sheet between Oakwood and Northcott and Bering. I walked these alleys today. I happened to be able to do that while working, and there's still today a significant amount of standing water there, and you can just see how they're. It's not paved. It's grass in the middle, and then ruts. And I'm assuming, Dustin, that waste management goes down, and these garbage trucks are really heavy. And it just sort of trails off into into the backyards in several spots here.
Mm-hmm.
One question I had, so I mean, I'm in favor of this. One question I had, though, walking it, and this is maybe a more detailed conversation later on, is all that water that's sitting in backyards now, as it rushes to the north towards the river. Right there at Fairway at the end of, say, Oakwood and Northcott, that one, I didn't see any drains. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen to the water and how it will flow there. And I know this is just the sort of engineering portion of all of this. So I'm supportive of that, but that's a future question I have.
That's a real fair question. The idea, without having done any engineering on the project yet, just as a baseline best practice, you get the water to the drains. So I would go out there and I would look at where the elevations are and where that water would naturally drain. So perhaps there is not a drain at the end of that alley, but perhaps there's a perceptible grade change that water would follow a line to a drain, which would be my assumption.
Yeah, it looked like it might take a left turn over to Oakwood where there's a drain there. But in any case, yeah, this is a problem, and I've heard that people have had this problem for 5 or 6 years running. It's caused sort of property damage, and they can't, they can't do landscaping and that sort of thing in their backyards. So,
yeah. So
that's just my comment on this.
Alleys and backyards have been something I've focused on. We've got our first successful backyard flood mitigation application in already. So I think this is an area where the town, with a little bit of investment, can make a profound improvement to the lives of our residents. And as a guy who grew up in a house that flooded and has a backyard now that has ducks, I think this is a good one.
Well, I would make a motion to approve the proposal for SEH for the lump sum fee of $1,800 for task 1.1 through 1.4, and on task 2 on an hour rate basis not exceeding $10,000.
Second.
If we have a motion and a second,
I just have one question. Again, the yellow roads get the difference in the two different areas is there's still topography that needs to be taken for a couple of these areas. Is that the difference, Dustin? It's one big project altogether, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's just it's marked differently because of the type of work that SEH is doing for each of the different alleys.
I believe that's accurate.
My understanding is the yellow, the topography's already been done, and that would need to be done for the purple roads.
And the time frame for this, I see a project schedule in the packet, but how is that going to be altered?
How will it be altered? I think that it can still be completed by September 10th. Terms and conditions. You know what, Councilman Gardner, I would be happy to provide you and the rest of council an email update with an exact answer rather than taking a guess at it, if that's okay.
That's fine. I just noticed that, again, because we held it back a little bit, just so we have an idea. And my only other question would be, the project itself, when it gets going, how will this be funded?
Either through existing bond issues that we have open or through the Wheel and Excise Fund.
That's money that's on hand?
Yes, it is, sir.
Okay. Very good.
Really quick, and my ears might be wrong, so I'm loath to step on Clerk Treasurer Mrs. role, but the project fee, I think Councilman Tulowitzki motioned for tasks 1.1 through 1.14 and 1,800. It's an 18,000. Unfortunately, that's another zero. If you would like to amend your motion,
I would love to amend that motion. Thank you.
And I would second it.
all right. I believe we're ready to call for the vote, Wendy.
Very good. I have Councilman Tulowitzki made the motion, seconded by Councilman Kulturitis.
Yes.
Gardner, thank you. Councilman Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Councilman Kulturitis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilman Schoon?
Yes.
Yes. Councilman Tulowitzki?
Yes.
Yes. And President Mellon?
Yes,
Yes. And it's approved then 5-0.
thank you. That'll take us to item E, the Baker Tilly agreement for the Munster landfill assurance test. This is something that we have seen before. Well, that we see
every year.
And
Yeah, this is an item for item compliance. Indiana Department of Environmental Management, as the proud owners of a forever landfill, even though it's a golf course now, item will consider it a landfill in perpetuity. So this is a thing we have to do forever, or until they change the law.
Then I would make a motion to approve the contract with Baker Tilly for services pertaining to the preparation and submittal to item of the financial assurance test for the former Munster landfill as presented.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions?
Hey, Dustin, I got a quick one. This isn't the thing, we're done with that testing aspect of it with the state, right?
No, there's continual testing. Andrew's engineer provides quarterly testing to item to monitor methane levels and other exceedances for other chemicals throughout the site. So if you're to walk the bike trail, either the Pennsy Greenway or along Calumet, you might see posts, red posts. Those are monitoring wells that we take routine tests out of.
Right, but wasn't item charging us something that Councilman Reed tried to get them to remove?
That one's done. That was a gas tank, underground storage tank.
Right.
And that is.
We're done with that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dustin. Okay.
That's me knocking on wood.
Yeah. And we worked really hard to get rid of that.
Oh, gosh.
It was
Yeah,
All
this
right.
is totally different.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And this one is basically just giving assurance that we have the $13-14 million required should there be some sort of catastrophe with the landfill, that we could mitigate that. That's what this report is for, more or less?
Basically.
Okay.
Okay. So, Wendy, can you please call for the vote?
Councilman Gardner made the motion and it was seconded by Councilor Tulowitzki. Councilor Gardner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Councilor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Schoen?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
President Mellon?
Yes.
Yes, we have a 5-0 to approve the contract.
Great. Thank you. That will bring us to the last item on new business, request for Hammond sanitary fee waiver. And Wendy, did you want to speak to this?
I'm going to ask Tricia this. She's the one that handled the conversations. and
Okay.
So,
Okay.
This is Tricia.
Tricia?
We had I think the council's aware that there's been a policy in place for quite a while for water leak adjustments. In the event that there's a running toilet or some other leak, a resident can sign an affidavit saying that they had it corrected, and then they fill out an application. We present that to you on the consent agenda and you approve those. That adjusts off fees related to water, the water that leaked out. And all that is adjusted in those cases is the water and the associated sales tax. We had a resident who had a significant leak, who requested that the flow charge that goes along with water that runs through the meter be waived as well. For as long as I've worked for the town, and in fact longer, I know the Hammond Sanitary District would not allow those, any kind of a refund, any kind of a fee waiver. That just didn't happen. And the town was not authorized to do that kind of thing for the sanitary district charges. Residents who were referred to the sanitary district were told no if they even were allowed to be heard at a meeting. This resident spoke with Mike Hawkins, the town of Munster's representative, and I believe that Mike is present in this meeting. They worked together, talking about it, and there appears to be some kind of a shift in the sanitary district. We were in contact, Mike Hawkins and I, as well as the other woman who does the water billing, about this matter over the last 2-3 months. I received a call from Marty Wilgos at the sanitary district about 2 weeks ago, telling me, basically he said, yeah, this has nothing to do with us. Thank you so much for asking. Whatever you guys want to do is fine. Which is a complete reversal from the position that they have taken all these years. As a result, it appears that this is a question for the council to decide how they want to proceed. I would imagine that this will not be the last request of this kind that comes through. So I would ask that you not think about it in terms of just one person, but how do you want to handle it moving forward? And as the memo states, whatever you decide you want to do, we'll prepare some type of a policy document for you to consider for approval down the road.
Thank you, Tricia.
I would move that we waive the flow fees associated on behalf of the Hammond Sanitary District.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or discussion?
Does this then, is Mike Hawkins on the call, and can Mike address, or am I able to ask Mike a question as representative to the Hammond Sanitary District?
Yeah, if Mike is willing, if he is here and
He was here.
Yes, I
Yeah,
see.
he's still here.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I guess my question is what is the, does this mean that if the town of Munster waives more fees, we've given the opportunity then for the city of Hammond to waive all the fees that go through this district? That the district has now has absolved their interest in waiving the fees, so we can do it and they can do it also?
This is Mike Hawkins. The city of Hammond, to my knowledge, has waived to date one fee since last May. And I detailed that in a memo to council and others. I don't know if they've done others, and we have no knowledge of what the city of Hammond Water Department does in billing for the residents of Hammond. Keep in mind, the amount that you're being asked to waive tonight is only a flow fee, and the residents still have to pay a monthly administrative charge or base charge, which basically funds the workings of the wastewater treatment plant and the transference system. Did that answer your question, Councilman Gardner?
I think so. I guess in a way, part of me says is there any more discussion that the Hammond Sanitary District will have with regards to this, or is this truly their wishes to have each of the respective cities and or towns do this, or is this something that we need to talk to the Hammond Sanitary District? It sounds like you have already, Mike. I just if there's another step that we need to take to say, you know, this seems unusual yet.
This may be up to the discretion of the town, the council. The rates that we're talking about, the residential flow rates for the Hammond Sanitary District, only affect the city of Hammond and the town of Munster, not the customer communities of Whiting, nor Highland, nor Griffith. They are on a different contractual basis. At council's pleasure, at the town's pleasure, you may want to ask the Hammond Sanitary District for a written document or verification, because this directive or this change in what they would like the town to do only came from the district manager. It was never discussed with the board that I am a member of. It depends what the town feels comfortable with, I would guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Chuck,
And
your
Go ahead, Ken.
your motion was related to this one appeal or all appeals like this in the future? And should it, I mean, should the wording of the motion reflect whichever it is?
Well, Ken, I think it was, this is Steve, it was my motion. My understanding
I'm sorry.
is,
Sorry,
worries.
Chuck.
My understanding is we're making the motion based on this one particular incident with the knowledge that we're setting precedent that future incidents, you know, may refer back to this. And it's also my understanding this is just the flow associated with water that was leaked, that we as a town have said the resident's not responsible for paying for the water because it was due to a leak. And so this would be adding on to that, saying they're not responsible for removing that water, flowing it to the Hammond Sanitary District, just for that amount.
I didn't know if we were creating a precedent where people wouldn't even have to appeal to the council. They could just inform the clerk treasurer and have it waived. You know, other people who are in the same circumstance.
At this time, it's only for this one individual. And if the motion passes, then we'll discuss setting a policy and having that approved at a future town council meeting.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find the amount of this waive.
It's in the second paragraph, 336.29.
Okay, well, I thought that was just our,
Oh, that's our
what
portion?
we waived. That's what we waived in March. that's not the flow charge.
The actual amount wasn't put in there, and it is about $310.
Oh, that, okay, so, all right.
I have no further questions.
And we don't know if Hammond waives the flow rates for its residents, or if this is, right, Mike?
We know Hammond did it at least once.
With the one time, but we don't know,
Yes.
okay. So, okay.
Does this motion need to be amended to include the flow amount, or will it stand as made?
No, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
I don't think you need the flow amount in the motion, but I think it's good for you to know what it is you're waiving. Even if it's an approximate number, is it $30, $300, $1,000? You know, I mean, so I think it's a good question to ask. I don't think it needs to be in the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, do we know, I don't know, Mike or anyone, maybe Dustin, what the sort of ratio is for the water that comes in? It looks like we're waiving 336.29 due to the leak. Is it like 1-to-1? What gets flowed out? You pay that much,
Excuse
or
me,
is it-
I've just found it. The amount is $307.23.
Yeah, that's the amount of the sanitary district flow charge for this one resident. The $336 amount that you see in the memo, that was the water and sales tax that you already waived back in March, I think it was. It came through as a leak adjustment. But tonight, the odd amount would be the $307 that Mike just told you.
So in total, this means the $704, or what roughly that is the combined charge. The resident won't be responsible for that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay. So at this point, we have the verbal of what Mr. Wielgos, I can never say that correctly, what Marty has said to you, Mr. Hawkins, about it being up to us, but we don't have anything in writing from them at this point.
Correct. He actually said it to Miss Abbott.
Oh, he
And-
did. Okay.
Yes, and all he told me was he took care of it.
But okay, so Tricia, we have that in hand, saying that it's our decision.
The conversation, he called me directly. That's in essence what he told me. I have nothing in writing but my own memo to the file that I wrote, but I don't have anything in writing from the sanitary district or from Mr. Wiggles himself.
Okay, I would, well, it seems, you know, it seems like the right thing to do for the resident, but Mr. Westland, should we have something in writing before we approve this, and then that would be setting a precedent?
I don't know that you need something in writing before you take this action. I
Okay.
don't want this to be the source of any misunderstanding. Not that I believe Miss Abbott had a misunderstanding, because I think she probably memoed the file exactly what she was told. But as she noted, as she was talking, this is a shift. I wrote it down: shift in policy. So, and I don't know, Mr. Hawkins can probably answer this better than I can. I mean, is there any way to get anything from them with regard to this shift in policy? I just don't want the sanitary district and the town, and I know Miss Abbott's recollection is going to be great, but for them to have a bad or a recollection of what happened, and then there to be a problem. So I don't have any problem with the action you're about to take. And if that's, the policy, I agree that it probably sets a precedent going forward. If people similarly situated come to you and ask for this to be waived, then you're going to deal with it the same way. I just don't want there to be, an issue with the sanitary district going forward. And so I'd ask Mr. Hawkins if there was any way to get something either from the board itself or from even an email. Well, I know Mr. Wilgus doesn't use email, but Mr. Allegretti does. So, something from them saying, confirming this shift in policy. I'm as surprised as Trish is that there's this shift.
Right. And I'm not concerned about Miss Abbott misunderstanding what she heard. I'm more concerned that later someone else will say that's not what they said or meant. I
agree. I agree. I think she probably got it 100% right.
Yes. Yes. So that's why I was asking. But if we can go ahead and move with this one, but then if we can get something in writing so we know whether or not we should make a policy that, if we have something in writing on which to set a policy that we could move similarly going forward with other residents that come forward with this type of issue.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just saw it as first of all fair for the resident, but also proof of concept to see, to test the change in information or mindset that we've gotten.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Wendy, I think we're ready to call for the vote then.
Very good. I have Councilor Tulowitzki made the motion. It was seconded by Dr. Kulturitis. Councilor Gardner, how did you vote? How do you?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Votes yes. Councilor Schoon?
Yes.
Votes yes.
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki?
Yes.
And President Mellon?
Yes.
President Mellon voted 5-0 to waive the fees in this one incident.
Yes. Thank you. So that brings, we are finished with new business. It brings us to our reports. And Wendy, did you want to give a census update?
I do have some numbers for you. The national completion rate is 56%. In Indiana, it's 61%. The town of Munster, we're at 76.8%. Yay, we're doing well.
Yeah.
We are number 8 in the state of Indiana. 2 of our other regional communities are beating us. St. John is number 2 in the state of Indiana with 81%, and Dyer is number 4 with 77.8%. So we're neck and neck with Dyer. Overall, we're doing very well. We are in the top 2.25% of the entire nation. So we're doing well, but we are still missing, almost 25% of our residents. So it's very important for everyone to fill out that census form.
Okay, it sounds like, so we didn't gain any ground. I know we were thinking about the competition. I think 8 was where we were last time and 2 weeks ago.
We did have a little bit of a surge. We got to number 6, and that was printed in the news you can use. So that was as of the 21st of April. And now we're just a little bit, other communities. Clearly Dyer did something that gave them a nice jump over the last week or 2. So I'm not sure what we took, but they got a nice little surge. So it'd be great if we had a surge as well.
All right.
Well, our percentage is what?
Our percentage is 76.8%.
76, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so thank you, Wendy. And we'll look for that to go up at our next meeting, be in the 80s. All right. Okay, so announcements, we have no meeting May 11th. We have regular on May 18th, no meeting the May 25th. Regular meeting on June 1st, no meeting June 8th, and then a regular on June 15th. And that brings us to adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Dr. Andy, seconded by Councilman Tulowitzki, correct? Very good.
That's correct.
Yes. And I don't see anybody raising their hand to stick around. So, so this meeting of the regular town or of the town council is adjourned at a late 8:11 p.m.
Very good.
And now we'll move right into our redevelopment meeting. I can get my agenda back. Okay. All right. Okay, I call to order the Redevelopment Commission regular meeting for May 4th, 2020 at 8:11 p.m. Wendy, can you please call, or have you taken note?
Well, we have Commissioner Gardner. Is in attendance? Yes. Commissioner Kulturitis? Yes.
Present.
Commissioner Schoon? Yes.
Yes, present.
Tulowitzki, Commissioner Tulowitzki,
Present.
and Commissioner Mellon, yes.
Present.
And I see John Castro is also a participant in the meeting.
I am here.
Hi, John, nice to see you.
Hello.
All right. Hi, John. Welcome. So that brings us to the public comment. And Dustin, I would ask if we received any comments or questions from the residents regarding the Redevelopment Commission.
I have not received any questions or comments from the public.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to our consent agenda.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none. Wendy, can you please call for the vote?
Very good. The record shows that Commissioner Gardner made the motion. It was seconded by Commissioner Kulturitis. And Commissioner Gardner, do you approve the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Kulturitis?
Yes.
Commissioner Schoon?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Tulowitzki?
Yes.
Yes. And Commissioner Mellon?
Yes.
Very good. The consent agenda is approved 5-0.
Thank you. We have no old business, no new business, no reports or announcements. So that brings us to adjournment. And I apologize, John, for such a quick meeting. But
Always a pleasure.
okay, same here. Thank you. So, what's
I
your
move to adjourn.
pleasure? What's your pleasure, commissioners?
Councilman
would-
Tulowitzki moved.
Okay.
Chuck Gardner seconded the motion.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor to adjourn, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. This meeting is adjourned at 8:14 p.m.
Very good.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Everyone, take
Thanks.
care.
Leanne, you'll
Yeah.
stop tomorrow?